Water and Environment Week 2020 is back. Join sector stakeholders as we discuss the centrality of water and environment resources for inclusive growth, employment, wealth creation, and how sustainable development and management of these resources can help Uganda address current challenges caused by COVID-19, raising water levels, flooding, and job loss. The Water, Environment, and Climate Change online sessions run from 13th to 18th September 2020 on UBC TV, NBS TV, and via Zoom. No matter who you are, where you are, and what you have, do your part to sustainably manage and develop water and environment resources for improved household incomes and quality of life. This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Water and Environment in proud partnership with WaterAid, GIZ Natures, IRC, FAO, and Water for People.
Discussion is going to have a number of people joining us online via Zoom, but also some of our panelists cannot be here physically. They'll be joining us over Zoom. We will be broadcasting this live on Uganda Broadcasting Corporation, UBC TV, and NBS television, but as well, we'll be engaging on our various social media platforms. Before we do kick off with anything, I do request that we respect our nation, our motherland, Uganda, and East Africa at large. Let's stand up and get to have the national anthems. Thank you very much. You can take your seats once again. And once again, welcome to the third Water and Environment Week. The Ministry of Water and Environment is where we're coming to you live from Luzira. And this week's theme, or this year's Water and Environment Week theme, is Water and Environment Resources for Inclusive Growth, Employment and Wealth Creation. I know many of you have come across or heard the saying that water is life, and definitely it is. Today's discussion is going to take us through that particularly. We'll be paying attention to the role of water and environment resources in the achievement of NDP 3, that we do have the goals and targets right there. And of course, this particular week does seek to contribute towards the attainment of the social economic transformation in achieving Ugandan National Development Plan and the Vision 2040. And we're just merely looking at an interface where sector actors and other stakeholders can have a knowledge exchange, dialogue, learn, for improvement of Uganda's water and environment resources. And without wasting any more time, just to set the pace for this particular discussion before I invite the chairperson organizing committee, we would like to have a video that gives us an overview of what we are here to do. And it's not only today, it will be running from today, the 13th, all the way to the 18th of September 2020. Let's take a look at the video.
Uganda Water and Environment Week is a week-long event organized by the Ministry of Water and Environment through the Water Resources Institute. This week has been successfully organized for the last 3 years. WEC was first celebrated in 2018 with the Vice President of Uganda, His Excellency Honorable Edward Sekandi, gracing the inaugural ceremony. During the same event, the Uganda Water Resources Institute was formally launched by the Prime Minister of the Republic of Uganda, Dr. Rugunda. Being the interface between sector actors and other stakeholders, a lot of learning, knowledge exchange and dialogue was witnessed during the second event.
Plastics and other litter have invaded every ocean, lake and river at all depths. Floods are washing away our fellow children, men and women. To address these worldwide disasters, all of us must work together.
Since 2018, the annual Water and Environment Week has sought to contribute towards attainment of sustainable socio-economic transformation of Ugandans in achieving Ugandan National Development Plan and Vision 2040. During this week, Uganda joins the rest of the world in commemorating 3 vital and interlinked days on the United Nations calendar. Every year, the UN works with governments, community organizations, and other civil society organizations to promote both local and global activities for the World Afforestation Day, World Water Day, and the World Meteorological Day. On 21st March, the World International Day of Forests is observed globally. Several activities are planned, and these include tree planting campaigns, exhibits and events that portray the importance of forests and trees, sharing forest-related infographics, videos, news and messages. On the 22nd of March, World Water Day is celebrated. This day focuses its attention on the importance of fresh water and advocates for sustainable management of freshwater resources. On 23rd March, the World Meteorological Day is celebrated. It commemorates the entry into force in 1950 of the convention that created the World Meteorological Organization. This day highlights the contribution of national meteorological and hydrological services to the safety and well-being of society. As part of the National Sensitization and Awareness Plan for the 3rd UWEC celebrations, Ministry of Water and Environment partnered with Workers Association of Uganda and Global Consulting Services to organize a 330-kilometer walk from Mabira Central Forest Reserve in Buikwe District to the banks of River Rizi in Bara District. The 10 days walk, dubbed Walk for Water, Environment and Climate Change, was graced by the Archbishop of Church of Uganda, His Grace Stephen Kazimba Mugalu. Thank you for being part of the online sessions for the Uganda Water and Environment Week 2020.
And of course, we now get to realize the very reason as to why we should have had the Water Week in the month of March. But unfortunately, that could not happen. To start off with the day's program, I would like to invite the chairperson of the National Organizing Committee, Dr. Florence Grace Adongo, who is also the Director of Water Resource Management at the Ministry of Water and Environment. Let's welcome her.
Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, Honorable Minister of Water and Environment, Honorable Minister of State for Environment, the Chairperson of the Environment and Natural Resource Committee of Parliament, members of Parliament here present, our Permanent Secretary, Minister of Water and Environment, all cultural leaders, the youth, our senior elders, forum, distinguished participants in your respective capacities, both here and online, protocol observed. Good afternoon. Welcome to the third Water and Environment Week 2020. My name has already been mentioned. I'm the chairperson for the Uganda Water and Environment Week. This is the third time I'm chair. It's good to see you all again, despite the interruptions and restrictions. The Uganda Water Environment Week has been rebranded to move virtual due to COVID-19 pandemic. In the last 2 years, we had growing numbers of participants, but today we have a few just in the room. We are very excited that this digital event experience has come to pass, and perhaps is going to be a model for many other sectors to emulate. I am sure that the decision we make during the event, which is going to take 5 days, is going to be very important to guide our society, our country, and the world at large. The cancellation of the Water Week in March gave us a challenge to rethink again. And this week, we are going to do things very different. So, and we'll be able to check the extent to which you are technologically compliant, because talking will be less, but a lot, face-to-face talking will be less, but a lot will be done online. The aim of this 2020 Uganda Water Environment Week is to allow us to explore the role of water and environment resources in the achievement of the third 5-year National Development Plan, goals and targets. Our theme is sustainable industrialization for inclusive growth, employment and wealth creation. The theme has been divided into 3 subsections. We have the water and environment security for inclusive growth, water and environment for employment and wealth creation, and then climate change and achievement of the National Development Plan 3 goals. Of course, we have a number of highlights, which I'll not go into because of time, but I would like to let you know that we have very many participants. Perhaps we might record the highest participants in the last 3 years. We have leaders from various fraternities. We have water environment users, communities, high-level dignitaries within Uganda and outside, members of parliament, development partners, high-level government dignitaries, cultural leaders, academia, private sector, NGO, and others. We expect, therefore, far better participation than ever before. Perhaps this is also very good because the 2020 Uganda Water and Environment Week is being held and following you right at home. And therefore, it would be very good for our students and pupils to stay tuned the whole week to learn more about water and environment. As I've said, our mode will be virtual, but in different styles. We shall have, after this opening, a key highlight of televised event, and it will include, of course, what we are now doing, but we shall have keynote presentation by Dr. Fred Muhumuza, policy development analyst and a lecturer. In the week, we shall have 3 thematic dialogues aligned to each sub-theme that I've mentioned, and this will be via Zoom. We shall also have 6 parallel sessions on Zoom on technical presentations for 5 days over the week. Each Zoom session is 2 hours and will be covered by 6 presentations, so we are expecting 30 sessions in all. We have short courses, online short courses, and side events that will be performed under the same arrangement. We welcome all the questions online, and please pose those questions so that the event is very interactive, and that is what we'd want to see. The sponsors, we need to acknowledge them, because without them, this event would not have been possible. We want to thank our partners and everybody for stepping forward to support this event and for encouraging us to go online to finish unfinished events of 2020, which happened in March, which you have just seen on the video. Special thanks go to GIZ, Natures, WaterAid, WWF, IRC, Water for People, Food Rights Alliance, IUCN, CARE, UNDP, Accord, FAO, and IIRR, among others. We cannot forget our own leadership in the ministry for encouraging us to explore other innovative ways of making this day a reality. Without such dedicated support, it would not be easy for us to be here. I cannot forget the National Organizing Committee. They are a great asset of think tankers and doers, and they have made this possible with support also from the media and our ICT offices. Looking forward to this digital innovative experience with you, through this week, we are also active on social media and other media platforms. But on the 18th will be the day when we close and we shall wrap up. I invite all of you again to join us, invite friends to be with us online. But we remain creative, innovative, full of developmental ideas to get our solutions alive on our common problems, because restriction by COVID should not stop us from thinking. And I would like to say that the country is challenged, and I think one of the key challenges we are facing right now is floods. We have COVID, and we have locust invasion. So our decisions here will give us a solution that gives a good mix of all the 3 to come out with the key mechanisms for implementing our National Development Plan. Welcome to the Uganda Water Week 2020 once again, and we are going to follow you right home, those who are at home, and those who are here. I would like to thank you for making the efforts to come. Thank you very much. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, and thank you for leading a fantastic team that has put this together on this opening ceremony of this week-long Water and Environment Week. For those of you who are joining us online and those who are watching us on UBC and NBS, we want to welcome you. You're watching this live broadcast of the Uganda Water and Environment Week celebration that starts today. And you can join us using the hashtag WEC 20, and that's being used on all our platforms on Twitter and Facebook. And you could also log in and join us via Zoom, where we will be picking online questions for our panelists. Some of our panelists are in this room, and the others are virtually joining us online on Zoom. Allow me invite the Honourable Minister of Water and Environment, the Honourable Sam Cheptoris, to make remarks. You're most welcome, Honourable Minister.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, the Honorable Minister of State for Environment, members of Parliament present, development partners, private sector players, civil society organizations, government officials in your respective capacities, representatives of our various stakeholders, participants of the 3rd Uganda Water and Environment Week, ladies and gentlemen. I wish to take this opportunity to welcome all of you to the 3rd Uganda Water and Environment Week 2020. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, this is the 3rd time that such an event is being organized in Uganda. We learned a lot from the experience of the 1st and the 2nd Uganda Water and Environment Weeks, but we are still learning. We shall therefore continue to address anything that may not work well, since the Water and Environment Week is an annual event. I wish to take this opportunity to thank the various organizations, agencies, and partners that have worked tirelessly with my ministry to ensure that this event takes place. These, among others, include WaterAid Uganda, IRC, Water for People, GIZ, FAO, IUCN, Accord, CARE, and many, many others. Your contributions are very much appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, as you have been told, the theme of this Water and Environment Week is Water and Environment Resources for Inclusive Growth, Employment, and Wealth Creation. This event is being celebrated under the 5 sub-themes, namely, 1, water and environment security for inclusive growth; 2, water and environment for employment and wealth creation; and 3, climate change and achievement of NDP 3 goals. Looking at the setup of Uganda Water and Environment Week, it is clear that this is remarkably linked to Uganda's National Development Strategy and the National Development Plan 3, the achievement of middle-income status, and achievement of sustainable development goals. As you discuss the various themes and undertake the various activities of the Water and Environment Week, I wish to call upon you to bear in mind that water and environmental resources are key strategic resources that are vital for sustaining life, promoting development, and maintaining the environment. These resources are therefore key in employment and wealth creation. For example, there is no activity that can be undertaken where water is not involved, either as primary input or a secondary input. Access to clean and safe water and improved sanitation facilities and practices are prerequisites to a healthy population and therefore have a direct impact on the quality of life, productivity of the population, and employment and wealth creation. Besides domestic water supply, water, as we all know, is also vital for livestock, industry, hydropower generation, agriculture, marine transport, fisheries, waste discharge, tourism, and environmental conservation. Water and the environment, therefore, significantly contribute to the national socio-economic development, although we most of the time take it for granted. Sustainable management and development of water and environmental resources is very important in times like this, where our country is faced with the challenges of COVID-19, flooding, rising water levels, and job loss. As you have already been informed, ladies and gentlemen, the Water and Environment Week comprises a number of activities, namely regional activities in 6 regional centers of the Ministry of Water and Environment that were held in March 2020, just before the lockdown. Unfortunately, commemoration of 3 important international days, World Forest Day, World Water Day, and the World Meteorological Day on 22nd March 2020 could not be done. I'm happy, however, that my ministry, in collaboration with many of our stakeholders, has been able to organize this event online. As a ministry, we expect that this event will provide an opportunity to all of you, our stakeholders, to exchange views, experiences, and practices that are key in propelling Uganda into a middle-income status. I wish, therefore, to call upon you to actively participate in the various activities and benefit from a wealth of knowledge and experience present here. I wish to challenge all of you to critically discuss the issues that will be brought up and come up with workable solutions. I want to assure you of my ministry's commitment to move forward the deliberations and the recommendations of the Water Week so that they can revolutionize the sector and enable you to contribute effectively to the achievement of NDP 3 goals and targets. I thank you for your attention. It is now my humble duty to invite His Excellency the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda to address us. Thank you very much.
Honorable Minister of Water and Environment, Honorable Ministers of State, Members of Parliament, development partners, private sector and civil society organizations, staff of the Ministry of Water and Environment, ladies and gentlemen. His Excellency the President of Uganda had planned to attend this ceremony and to open the ceremony, but because of other matters that have cropped in, that involved him, he has been unable to attend in person and has delegated me to represent him on this occasion. Please allow me to proceed to convey to you his statement. I wish to take this opportunity to speak to Ugandans on the issues of water and the environment during the opening of the 3rd Uganda Water and Environment Week 2020. Uganda's economy is largely dependent on its stock of environmental and natural resources. Water and environment resources support life and socio-economic activities. Water is central to agriculture. The mainstay of Uganda's economy, from which about 85% of the population derives their incomes and livelihoods. Provisions of adequate water for agriculture will spur transformation of the economy through increased productivity for both livestock and crops. Agricultural production is, however, dominated by the smaller holder, subsistence farmers engaged in production of food and cash crops, horticulture, fishing, and livestock farming. And the smaller holder farmers are contributing approximately 80% of the total agricultural output and marketed agricultural produce. Though agriculture is one of the biggest contributors of Uganda's economy, individual farmers' income is still significantly lower than other economic players. For example, the average income of farm families is approximately 70% lower than for non-farm households. Also, around 4% of the individuals in non-farm households are poor, while more than 26% of individuals in farm households are poor. This assumes that there are large numbers of small and low-income farmers who are collectively contributing to the national GDP. But each farmer's productivity and profitability are still very low. Among various factors behind low productivity and low profitability of Uganda's agriculture, lack of access to water sources poses a fundamentally acute problem. Agriculture in Uganda is almost completely dependent on rain. This makes the farmers highly vulnerable to increasingly unpredictable rainfall patterns. Again, growing threats of climate change and associated negative impacts to Uganda's economy, climate-resilient irrigation schemes will be able to provide reliable and sustainable water solutions for Ugandan farmers. This will enhance agricultural productivity, improve food security, alleviate rural poverty level, create local job opportunities, and achieve sustainable and inclusive economic growth. Government has also adopted a national irrigation policy and is committed to investing in water for irrigation, infrastructure, and to boost commercial farming in an effort to transform Uganda society from a peasant to a modern and prosperous country. Water is also required as an indispensable input in agro-industrialization. It must therefore be available in adequate quantities and corresponding qualities at the right time and right place. Support and promotion of strong, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth in Uganda is therefore key and requires exploring opportunities for green growth, blue economy, and job creation related to water and environment, and their roles in the bioeconomy. Environment and natural resources are, however, under increasing pressure despite their importance in ensuring water and environment security and socio-economic growth. For example, the forest cover has declined from 24% of Uganda's total land area in 1990 to 12.4% currently. This is attributed to biomass fuel cooking, combustion with other auxiliary drivers such as expansion of agricultural land, sporadic urbanization and income poverty, industrialization, and inadequate intensive for private plantation forests. About 90% of Ugandans use firewood and charcoal for cooking. Similarly, the natural wetlands coverage as a percentage of the total land area declined from 15.6% in 1994 to 8.9% currently. It is estimated that Uganda loses 846 kilometers of its wetland annually. The majority causes of wetland degradation are poor farming practices, unplanned urbanization and settlements, excessive water obstruction, income poverty, poor intra and intra-sector coordination with regards to continued issuance of land titled in wetlands and sand mining and industrialization with some of the demarcated business industrial parks located in wetlands. I have, however, noted that at times developments in fragile ecosystems such as wetlands and river banks are carried out by misguided people. We need to educate them so that they can stop these bad practices. You may recall that on 11th April 2020, the rising water levels of Lake Victoria caused the dislodgement of encroached wetlands at lake shores, disconnecting them from the mainland into the water bodies, causing big threats to major capital investments, especially hydropower dams. While floods in the region have always occurred at intervals of about 50 years, the flooding cycle has become shorter. This is due on the increased settlements and developments in flood plains, poor agricultural practices, and deforestation. These have made the soils loose and steep slope bare and allowed water to move very fast to valleys immediately after the rains. The above factors have all combined to further worsening the flooding problem. As employment is created in a more diversified and industrializing economy, those farmers who remain in the agriculture sector will have access to more land for farming and benefit from economies of scale. Equally, this sector will enjoy an increased demand for their produce from an increasing number of salaried factory workers, which will in turn suffice and increase agricultural productivity in our country. This various circle will be strengthened by the higher household incomes enjoyed by those employed in industries, which will lead to an increase in demand for quality education and better health services. Finally, I wish to congratulate the Ministry of Water and Environment and its partners for organizing this event and for bringing together all the key stakeholders to dialogue on issues affecting the sector and Uganda in general. I wish you fruitful deliberations. I wish to declare that the third Uganda Water Environmental Week formally open. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Uganda, Honorable Edward Kiwanuka Sekandi. But it was a very sad moment speaking about the realities of what's happening in Uganda, especially that we are losing over 800 kilometers of wetland coverage. And that's very true. Some Honorable Minister one time asked, why do people want to live in wetlands? Are they frogs? I still ask that myself as well. But we come to realize that we need to respect the environment, otherwise it will backfire, and we've seen the environment backfiring on many occasions. The results are never beautiful at all. To set the pace for our keynote presentation that's coming in just a few minutes, we'll have yet another video that will be playing. Let's take a look at this and then get our keynote address.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 3rd Uganda Water Environment Week 2020. In this week, we explore the role water and environment resources play in the achievement of the National Development Plan 3 goal and targets. The key goal of NDP 3 is to increase the average Ugandan household's incomes and equally improve the quality of life of the citizens. The catalyst for this is through industrialization. During this week, we shall assess how water and environment resources are central in increasing household incomes, improve the quality of people's lives, and in achieving sustainable industrialization for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation. Water supports life and socio-economic activities such as hydropower generation, agriculture, fisheries, domestic water supply, industry, navigation, tourism, and ecosystems. Water is also an indispensable input into agro-industrialization. It must therefore be available in adequate quantities and quality at the right time and right place. Uganda's economy will continue to depend on the available stock of water, environmental and natural resources to produce goods and deliver services, because industrialization highly relies on raw materials from the environment and natural resources. Proper wetland management is critical for mitigating flood risks, marine ecosystem maintenance, maintaining water quality and quantity of water resources. Preserving water resources, environment and natural resources is critical for human health and tourism. Mitigating climate change, orchestrated impact of droughts, floods, heat waves, and landslides on the livelihood of vulnerable population is critical for reducing income inequality, improving livelihoods, and ensuring energy, water, food, and ecosystem security. Ensuring water security through sustainable utilization and efficient management of Uganda's water and environment resources will be key in ascertaining that the various sectors in the economy achieve their socio-economic development objectives. Therefore, water and environment resources will remain key for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation. Their sustainable development and management can help Uganda address current challenges caused by COVID-19, rising water levels, flooding, and job loss.
All right, thank you very much. And that sets the pace for our keynote presentation that is coming in from Dr. Fred Muhumuza, who is a policy development analyst and lecturer at Makerere University. And the presentation will basically focus on water and environment resources for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation. I welcome you, Dr. Fred Muhumuza. Let's welcome him.
Thank you, Mildred, and good afternoon, everybody. Allow me to observe all the protocols. The protocols were quite long, but as the Vice President and the ministers and the director listed them, I do observe them in the interest of saving time. My presentation should be visible to you right now, and the key messages is what I would like to start with. One is that we are actually watery creatures, and I'll show you what Google told me about us being watery creatures. So this discussion is about us. The other thing is about the human beings should be central to development. We should not build a road or put airplanes or put all sorts of things, not minding about the human being. And since the human being is water, by and large, that means the two should be kept together. We will talk about linking the development for the benefit of humanity, and then the challenges that we actually are facing and which we need to engage in this discussion going forward. And I want to really appreciate the organizers of this meeting and for giving me the opportunity to share my views, which I'm so passionate and passionate about water and environment for development. As a development practitioner, this is really an honor to me to share my views with everybody in this third Water and Environment Week. And I will end with the need for some policy and legal and institutional reforms and challenges if we are to really handle the future. And through my presentation, I'll show you that the future doesn't smile at us at all. And thank God we are all putting on masks, so you can't know whether I am smiling or not. But the future is really not smiling at us. Next, please. You will notice what I've said, we're actually watery creatures. This was Google giving me some information from a journal of biological chemistry, telling us that your brain and your heart is 73% water, your lungs are about 83% water, your skin is 64% water, your kidney is 79%, even your bones have water in them, at least up to 31%. So literally, you are a watery creature. And if without water, you are dead on arrival. And so water is central to our specific investment and lifestyle. I look at the issue of interdependency because this discussion is about how we link water with industrialization, with employment, with household incomes. This is the focus of the National Development Plan 3. And as I've said, we can't just do things in abstract, we need to put them together. Now that we are watery creatures, two things must happen. We must do investments that keep water closest to us as beings. For some of us here, water is right in your bedrooms. You call them self-contained rooms. There are other people, water is in a standpipe that is possibly in their compound. Others have to do 1 kilometer or 2 to pick their water. There are even those who are having to do 5 kilometers to find that water. So the investments we should be making should already be speaking to where do we need to be. People should have access to water, and not just water, but quality water. Both quantity and quantity, that should be our conversation going forward. But even after having that water close by, can you afford it? Which is the household income aspect. I know there are people who will be arguing government should provide us with free water. Government also has its own limitations, as I will show you shortly. So the best way is for government to empower citizens to be able to afford the water out of their household incomes. And that is the focus of the National Development Plan, to increase our incomes so that we can be able to afford the water, but also as we pay for the water, in the process we generate additional resources that go into further investments to give us that particular water. So our plans, our interests, our thinking should be how do we create those opportunities for income which will facilitate the household to be able to afford their own water. And there are many other uncoordinated troop movements, as they call them. The last 1 month I've had no water in my household except rainwater. Thank God it is raining. Because somebody somewhere was doing a road and I think they cut the water pipe, so I just have empty taps and have gone back to my traditional ways of bathing from a basin and carrying water in a jerrycan and a few other things that I thought I had forgotten, but I've realized I actually still can do it. But these are the interdependencies that even the income, now the physical water is not next to me. Next, please. We are looking at household employment and water investments. That household income is critical for people to be able to access the water through the charges, as we have said, which eventually feed again into the investments. And the NDP rightfully is saying that natural resource and climate change management are critical to achievement of increased household incomes and improvement of quality of life of the population. We are not just talking about people living. The quality of that life is as important as the life itself. And the interaction between economics and health has come up with what we call quality of life adjusted years. We have seen people ask to die. Some have actually killed themselves. It's because they see no more quality in the life they are going through. That should not be over Ugandan. And so we want to do our water investments, but more so going through this phase of the National Development Plan should not just allow Ugandans to live longer, but allow them to have a quality of life that they are proud to have. And we're going to see how water and environment should help them to do that. Next, please. This is a picture I took at my cousin's home some 5 years ago. It really shows the centrality of water in the people whose lives we are trying to transform. This is a household that survives on maize growing, which is basically water and environment. But they also have their jerrycan there. I didn't ask how far they have to go to fill that jerrycan before they can use it. But that's a jerrycan being shared between a household of 5 or 6 people. So water is both in terms of where they are today, and a lot of household incomes today are coming from agriculture. Either you are a farmer, or you are processing, or you are trading, but your bottom line, without water and environment, you are nothing. Both as a person, remember you're a water creature, but also your livelihood is endangered without water and environment. Even others who may be saying, well, they are informal or informal employment in manufacturing and services, again, the water and the environment comes into the picture, and I will show you shortly. People we have always envied do now have serious problems. So we are all dependent on water and environment, and we cannot take it from the center. If that center can't hold, it doesn't matter how developed you are, as I will show you shortly. So as we transform them from here, we should have a vision of where we want them to go. And thank God for World Vision, my friends. They took these pictures that I thought we should be looking at. On the left, you are seeing what it was, and on the right, you are seeing what it is today. So do we have that picture of, by the end of the NDP3, where do we want the water and environment sector to be? Where do we want households to be? Where do we want the factories to be? Do we have that picture? And by the way, by the end of the National Development Plan 3, we will be halfway through the mark of Vision 2040. So I'm going to propose to government that we now do a mid-term evaluation, because this journey began in 2010, and we gave ourselves 30 years to have transformed Uganda. So by the end of this plan in 2025, we will be right on the halfway mark. So this NDP is not just like any other. It is the one for us to settle and say, where are we now that we're halfway through Vision 2040? Can we see it? Are we on track, or have we lost track? And if we have any challenges today, we need to correct them during this period of the NDP3. And water and environment is going to be very, very central. I'm not going to relax until this centrality is brought out. Next, please. So here I'm arguing that strategy is, do not just throw the water just to keep the baby. I know there is a saying that don't throw the baby because the water is bad. Now here we are saying, even if you're keeping the baby, please don't throw away the water. You can recycle it. You can be mindful about that water, but don't just say, for me, I have the baby, the water can go away. Because there are certain things I know we have done in this country, and I've been at the center of some of them, observing or even making a contribution, where we think we can attract investors at any cost. Give them the wetland if that's what they need. Give them the forest if that's what they need. Demolish all these other things because we must generate power. Karuma Falls has been on discussions, all sorts of falls, all sorts of forests, all sorts of things. We cannot attract investors at any cost, because sometimes the means is even more important than the end. So we cannot say that the end justifies the means. No. The means might be important, especially when you're talking about things like water and environment, because you may never even get to the end. If your environment is destroyed, if your water is not holding, all that you planned to have can easily be lost, because this is an ecosystem we are talking about. So the cost of getting quantity and quality water that we actually require is rising. And because that is happening, a lot of our desired investments are not happening, because our investors are beginning to say the cost of doing business in Uganda is very high. And I will just make a small discussion of one of these. But let's first move to that next slide. This is what is happening on the west coast of the US. You can lose everything and go back to the dark past because of the environment. The fires have destroyed over 5 million hectares in the last 3 weeks. You can see people's charged vehicles. So you have built people's incomes, you have built industries, you have transformed into middle income status, but if you forget your environment, you can be washed back in just 3 weeks. You can be washed back in just one day. So they cannot say the end justifies the means. The means is as important as the end. So I really want these fundamentals adopted by policymakers and decision makers in this country, that we might build things unless we really put in a pack fundamentals like water and environment as security, and you'll see that later on, we might lose everything that we're struggling to do. Next, please. So these costs can go high. This is our darling investment from Katosi, 55 kilometers of pipelines to pick water from Lake Victoria to serve Kampala, Mukono, Wakiso, and Entebbe, all of which are within 5 to 8 kilometers of Lake Victoria. So why did we have to go 55 kilometers to pick the water, which is actually just close by here? To do with issues of quality and quantity. So now we are actually throwing good money after what we shouldn't have been investing in, but because we did not invest early enough to preserve our lake closest to where the people are staying, we allowed them to mess up with the lake. Now when we want to serve them water, it's not available. This is a huge investment, and thank you for our development partners who have made this possible. This is going to give us an extra 160 million liters per day to add on the 240 million liters that we're using today. And as we transform and people come near to Kampala, Wakiso, Mukono, who knows, soon we'll be requiring 1 million or 600 or 700 million liters. Where shall we get the water from? These are the challenges we really want to be thinking of as we look at where we are going, the transformation we are having. Otherwise, our industrialists are going to meet this cost. And before you know it, they'll be saying it is too expensive to operate in Uganda, government should subsidize us. They have already said it on electricity, and they were celebrating because government is subsidizing electricity for industrialists below the production cost of the electricity. You can't celebrate. A Ugandan doesn't benefit, but neither does an industrialist benefit because things are twinned together. So because of that, government goes into borrowing. Next slide, please. Because we want to be subsidized, government goes to borrow. This is the borrowing of government since 2013, 2014. Those bars you see are monthly stocks of government debt from the banking sector. Forget about the external donors. This is basically net credit to government by the banking sector within Uganda itself. Now, when you do that, you're actually undermining the very private sector that came here hoping they would be picking money from those banks. So you shoot yourself in the morning, and yet you want to work in the evening. And the consequence of that, next slide, please, is a table that is going to show you what transpired last year. Treasury operations. This is information from the Ministry of Finance. It might have changed. I don't expect it to go down. It might have gone higher. That in 2019-2020, we borrowed up to 8.5 trillion shillings. But of that, 6 trillion was to do debt management. So it wasn't even available to plant a tree, to provide a bucket of water. It was to pay for our previous sins. Only 2.5 was available for service delivery. And yet here we are, badly needing more water to invest in the environment and water sector. And so these are the kinds of conversations we really want to have. How do we harmonize policies so that we know that the means is as important or possibly even more important than the end? Because you might never reach the end if this is what is going to be happening to us. Next slide, please. And there are new emerging challenges. This road looks like it's in Bwindi, but actually this is Hoima City. This is a city road. Why am I bringing this? I took this 2 weeks ago. Now this city must protect this environment. I'm not very sure whether cities have capacity, ability, and laws, and policies, and knowledge to protect this kind of environment they have inherited. So before we knew it, I don't know what will be here in 5 or 10 years from now. But these are the new challenges that as we transform, new things are coming up. So we need to invest in the local governments and the urban authorities. Next, please. So I am making some proposals and picking from history. that we have what we call a certificate of financial implications. Before a policy or laws go to Parliament, there is a certificate of financial implications signed by the minister to say, yes, whatever is being proposed here will be good for the budget. We also have a gender compliance certificate. We also have some other certificates. I am trying to make a proposal that before land titles are given to anybody, forget about this thing of environmental impact assessments being done after somebody has already received their land. No, they should tell us what they are going to do with that land, and then a title is given after we have known what are the consequences on water and environment of whatever this person wants to do, especially in a country where we have very poor land use policies, if any. So we can only hold them at this level. So I am saying this should come through, and the Ministry of Water and Environment should be directly involved in issuing this particular certificate, so that we curb these things before they happen. Titles will never issue over wetlands if this was happening. So we cannot sit back and wait for environmental impact assessments, and then we hear the environment is being destroyed. Same thing with the people who are putting up power dams. Right now they get their licenses from wherever. But remember, they are targeting rivers. And we are not involved in that space adequately and effectively well. We need to put these in the laws, that before authority is given for anybody to do anything out there, the Water and Environment Ministry must be having a central role to play right from day one. Next, please. Budgeting. Budgeting in Uganda is like putting eggs on a tray. Every slot gets one. But there are some sectors that are even more important than others. And so we cannot just take everybody like pieces on a chessboard. They are not equal. A pawn will move just a few pieces. A bishop will move in any free space but diagonally. A queen will move in any free space diagonally, vertically, horizontally. I want to believe that is the Ministry of Water and Environment. It is that important that it can give you a win of the game or you can lose the game. It doesn't matter whether you're in health, in education, in agriculture. Without water and environment, all your investment can be lost. So our budgeting should not be a straight line distribution of every sector. Some sectors are more important than others because they are a foundation on which others leverage and build, both now and in future. So the budgets have got to go back and find a different logic. And we are going to engage the Ministry of Finance because the budgeting year has begun. It should not be a straight line distribution method. People should be logical in what am I funding and how does this leverage to others. So we want to see more water and more money thrown to protection of water and the environment. Next, please. This is Buhimba Health Center. I have good memories about this health center. You can see the before and after, and again here World Vision intervened. 44 years ago, I had a domestic accident that almost chopped off the apex index finger top of my hand. And I had to go to this health center as a small boy of about 6 years for all my treatment. And I got all my treatment there, and my finger is with me. Years later, before this World Vision went in, a woman went to deliver in the middle of the night. By 5 a.m., mothers will know, she was told you need to go to the latrine to ease yourself, and then you can come because the labor pains are increasing. And while she's there, one of the sticks, these were sticks covering the pit, broke. And she was headed down in the whatever is down there in a latrine in a village area. And one of the sticks, remember she's pregnant? At 5 a.m., she screamed. Not many people were available to come and rescue her, except the askari, who is a man, but at that point you are not minding who has come. It's okay. And that story went round, and an NGO called World Vision responded. That's why you see what is happening. This is a transformation we are looking for. But we are saying the planning has got to be people-centered. Now, this facility had no water at all. And as you can see, the old and the new are with us. As I close, next slide, I'm going to where are the households spending their income? Because we're talking about linking and generating incomes. It's not just about you getting the income in January. It's also about what do you do with that income in order to create wealth for February, for March, and next year. And so this slide is from the UBOS indicators on where do households spend their money. You can clearly see that where they are spending their money, there is no wealth creation out of household incomes. This is one of the things we want to change. They spend a lot of money on food and non-alcoholic beverages, 45% if you go by the national, but you can pick your area of interest depending on where you come from, Central, Eastern, Northern, Western, and Kampala. But if I follow the national line, 45% of national household household income goes into food and non-alcoholic. And the next big tranche of 16% goes into housing, water, electricity, gas, and other fuels. All the 1 and 2s are related to water and environment. So if you don't invest adequately in water and environment, 60% of household income will still be wasted outside wealth creation. And then we'll lose the linkage of household income and wealth creation. These are some of the things when we come back and say, why are things not transforming? It's logic, and it's logical to know where should we put our money. Next, please. And one of the innovative ideas that I picked from friends the other day, how do we convert rubbish into briquettes so that we can use that for cooking? And we can save the trees that people are cutting mercilessly today. So these are some of the ideas we can teach in schools, we can skill Ugandans, we can empower Ugandans. It becomes a source of income, but it also saves our environment. We want to see the ministry engaged in those areas. And finally, the next slide, which is my concluding, next to the conclusion, is that we must ensure we support industries and agriculture and employment as a self-reinforcing process that households earn from it, but also they build into that. The best signal you can give to investors, whether domestic, what we call the DDI, direct domestic investors, or FDI, foreign direct investment, is what is the policy signal about water and environment, about the ecosystem management, because nobody wants to find themselves like the pictures we have seen in California, Oregon, and the Washington state. The common picture that we have used is in the next slide. Developed under the National Development Plan 1, and you will take time to look at it. This tried to help us when we were developing the National Development Plan, the first one, to see how do we link up the different sectors for planning and budgeting purposes. Growth of the economy is in the yolk of every egg, that's where life is. But the albumen, the shell are equally important because they are either complementary or they are supportive or they are kind of the enabling sectors. So as I've said, some sectors are enabling to others, and therefore they deserve to get adequate budgets because they support the others. If our environment collapses, whatever we are doing in this national development, we will lose it. And that for me is a key message. And the last slide is saying, how do we deal with the cross-cutting issues? How do we deal with the cross-cutting issues? Issues of governance. We have now split up districts into very tiny, small objects. And yet these districts have a duty to protect the environment. These districts have a duty to protect water, to manage their own water systems. But some of them are so tiny that they actually have a human being's budget. We are undermining our water and environment initiatives and investments. So we need to find a way on how do we deal with this. For now, I'm saying we can only now handle it from the center. But that will not be sustainable. We must find a way of empowering either local governments at regional level or whichever levels. I will leave that to the policymakers and the lawmakers who are in Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope this gives us some insights to think about. Thank you.
Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for Fred Muhumuza. Thank you very much for setting the stage for what is going to be a very interesting discussion very shortly with our panelists who are coming to us via Zoom and, of course, here at the Ministry of Water Auditorium. If you're watching us, we're actually in this very beautiful auditorium. I've been informed, Honorable Minister, this is the first public event we are having here in the auditorium. And I must say it's very beautiful. The Ministry, well done. May I invite our panelists who are here in the room to join us at the front. Allow me to invite the Honorable Kefa Chiwanuka, who is the chair of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee of Parliament. Honorable, round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, as Honorable comes. I'll also invite one of our hosts, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Water and Environment, Alfred Okoto Kidi, and also invite Mr. Godbert Mshabe, who is the Associate Director, Great Lakes Institute for Strategic Studies. Joining us online is Professor Pamela Mbabazi, the Chairperson, National Planning Authority. Round of applause, let's welcome her. She's online. Also joining us online is Ms. Elsie Atafua, who is the UN Resident Representative for Uganda. And also with us, and we had seen him via Zoom, is the Honorable Eli Karuhanga, Chairman, Private Sector Foundation, Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a powerful panel that is here physically and online. I want to mention that we have two sessions of this panel. The first session I will handle, and the next session my colleague, Ms. Tuhese, will handle. I also want to specifically draw your attention to what is today's theme for day one, which is really the opening, which will handle water and environment security for inclusive growth. Tomorrow, we'll be looking at employment and wealth creation, and also on the subsequent days, climate change and achievement of NDP 3 goals. So this is really a comprehensive week-long activity or plan for the Water and Environment Week. So you're most welcome to join us. So this first particular session, which will handle policy, has the PS and the Honorable Chair of the Natural Resources Committee, and also the Chairperson of NPA. And to the technical team, I want to start with Pamela Mbabazi, who is the Chair of NPA, who's going to take us through the national agenda on achieving environment and natural resources, or at least the goals we have for environment and natural resources we are pursuing for the next 5 years as part of NDP 3, and how this success on the agendas is measured after these 5 years. So Pamela, if you could go ahead, and we'll try and be brief so we can take as many questions. Over to you, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much, Moderator. A very good afternoon, all protocol observed. Let me begin by thanking the organizers for inviting us to be a part of this. So you did ask, Moderator, essentially, what are the big national agendas on environment and natural resources that Uganda is pursuing in the next 5 years? And I'm happy to let our fellow Ugandans know, and everybody listening in, that the NDP3 has a full program on water, environment, natural resources, and climate change, focusing specifically on a number of areas, basically 4. One is the water zone catchment management planning and implementation. The other is on strengthening enforcement of compliance to water and environment standards and regulations through enhanced coordination and financial facilitation of the mandated enforcement agencies like Neymar. The other is increasing forest and tree coverage by planting at least 40 million trees annually on the degraded ecosystems and public institutions' land. And finally, the whole program is centered on value addition to water and environment resources, so as to economically empower neighboring communities through cottage industries that will create jobs, incomes, and alternative livelihoods. You will recall that the keynote speaker mentioned the centrality of water. Now, if our goal of the National Development Plan 3 is about improving household incomes and the quality of life of Ugandans, we must deliberately and intentionally develop our water and environment resources. So how are we going to measure our successes, was the other question you posed. All our NDP3 interventions have targets and indicators that we will be measuring every step of the way. And these will be monitored annually to inform our appropriate actions, whether we need to make any changes. But the plan will also have to undergo a midterm review halfway through the 5 years around 2023. So we will be monitoring and evaluating the achievement of the targets that we have set. But success for water and environment intervention will also be measured through annual assessments of changes in the water quality, the forest and wetland coverage. I talked about planting of trees, but also environment compliance levels, among others. So those are the ways in which we intend to monitor the targets, but also ensure that we are achieving the results as set out in the plan.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Before I let you go, Pamela, let me ask you one more question. So what do you see as NPA as the most critical obstacles to achieving those goals that you've mentioned, that agenda that you've run us through?
Right, thank you. I think for me, the biggest challenge we have as a country is what I would want to call the wrong perception that environment and natural resource management is actually the sole responsibility of NEMA or the Ministry of Water and Environment. And I think this is what is undermining our collective efforts in curbing environmental degradation. I want to call us on all of us as Ugandans. Water is life, water is central, environment is life, environment is central. It should be the concern of every Ugandan. It should be the role of us all, different stakeholders, coming together to handle and deal with water and environment, natural resources. The other factor that I see that is very limited, and it was talked about by the keynote speaker, is the limited financing. Water is very central, but we have observed that there is limited financing to especially enforce compliance to environmental standards and regulations. This must change. I think those two major issues, in my view, are some of the major challenges we're facing as a country, and we need to address them. And perhaps to preempt you, I think that NDP3 has come out very clearly in trying to suggest and spell out what needs to be done to address these challenges. On the one hand, we have clearly and deliberately called on government and all stakeholders to use the program approach. We are moving away from the silo way of working. We want to work together as different units of government, but also as different stakeholders in this country to handle the challenges we're facing. So the program approach will enable us to diffuse and mainstream water and environment management across all stakeholders, both state and non-state actors, and it's important that we embrace this. But also, we are working with the Ministry of Finance to align the budget with the plan. We have to make sure that the interventions that we have indicated in the plan are implemented. And this alignment of the budget to the plan is so fundamental and must be really worked on together in the spirit of ensuring that the financing required for us to realize tangible results is achieved. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and please do stay with us. Don't go too far. And I must say the reason you're probably not wearing a mask is that you're alone in your room. So I'm hoping you're keeping safe by yourself, and that's why you have no mask on. And we are trying to ensure that everyone here has a mask. I can hear you, Pamela, so you're protected. Don't worry. All right. So I want to come to the Honorable Chair of the Natural Resources Committee, Honorable Kefa. Let me begin by asking you, despite the several legislative accomplishments over, this long period, water and environment sector is facing very significant challenges, and we can mention them. We were speaking during lunch with Godba over this. The issues of, the nation's forests, wetlands, water resources, and climate change. Parliament, which you belong to, and your committee, and the Natural Resources Committee yourself can do to address these challenges.
I think, first of all, let me congratulate the ministry having gone through the obstacles to be able to hold this Water Week. I've had the opportunity of attending the previous two, and I was wondering what was going to happen this year, and thank God you've worked around around it, and we're having this. Now, I think in answering your question, we need, first of all, to understand what are the drivers of the challenges that we're having. And I think those were, they've been very well elaborated by the keynote speaker, and some of them also by His Excellency the Vice President, quite a number of them. Now, against that, again, probably you may ask yourself, what more in terms of legislation that Parliament may be able to do? I think somehow we think we've done everything that is possible, that can be possibly been done. I think there is only one thing now that we need to look at, which needs to be done, and that's the climate change bill, which is before Parliament. And that is, I think, to enable us to achieve a number of areas which have not been addressed at the moment. I think one of them is giving the force of law to what the government has previously agreed to as the Kyoto Protocol. And this has key response measures that governments and different agencies in the country that they have to take. It has targets that government and agencies that they have to take. I think that's one thing which we have to quickly process in the Parliament and make sure that it's approved. And hopefully we can get that agreed, passed by Parliament in the course of this Parliament. As you know, most of us now are in campaigns, and it's a pleasure for me to be off the campaign trail to be here. Now, the other thing I think that we've done, which I think we need to, okay, so that's what is left to be done. The other thing that we need to see is enforcement of a wide range of legislations that have been passed by Parliament. And one of the most recent is the Neymar Act, or the National Environment Management Act. And within this, we've put things, for instance, on emissions, littering, increased the penalty, which was not there before. We've set up conservation areas, for instance, in relation to areas which have been taken away by infrastructure development projects like the Karuma. We've banned the use of single-use bags, polythene bags, which are under 30 microns, encouraged recycling, and also we introduced something which we thought would be novel, and we're looking forward to see some activists actually applying it, whereby somebody can sue, we call it right of way, where, for instance, if a forest is being, a forest or wetland is being degraded, where somebody can sue in the name of that forest or in the name of that wetland as an individual or as a guardian of that river, or in the event of degradation of a wetland. Now, we haven't yet seen that being applied, but I think what we need is to see now the public, the activists, putting into place the wide range of measures that have been introduced. And I think we also need to start, we also need to stop thinking, and I'm glad that you participated in a debate I had with a colleague here. We need to stop thinking in terms of what is it that Parliament has done, or what is it that government has done to help in implementing the policies and measures that are there. We also need to start thinking as individuals. The problems, the challenges that we're having are not affecting just the government. Actually, the government somehow, as individuals there in the government, may be protected. Probably they have resources and they're much better off. But as an individual at the grassroots, I think one is much more exposed to the challenges that the current calamities that are actually lingering on the horizon are likely to pose on an individual. So all of us have to think about what is it that we can do at the community level, at the district level, at an institutional level, and then as a government. I lived for a while in the UK, And for instance, donors used to assess, in terms of assessing grants, how is an organization responding to the environmental threat? Now, are we having policies and measures as individuals helping us to respond to the threats of the environment?
Yes.
I think that's what, broadly, I think that's where we need to focus.
All right. I want to stay with you before I go to the PS. You know, and speaking to Fred's presentation around the issues of a lack of alignment of government policies and plans across the board. What priority actions, do you think as Parliament you can promote to drive convergence between industrialization, job and wealth creation? And when I talk about industrialization, job and wealth creation, Fred spoke to the fact that you cannot say, the end justifies the means. You may want to think through the means before you actually discuss how you get there. So how do you work as Parliament plan to promote that convergence, as you discuss industrialization, job creation and wealth, that brings to the fore the whole, issue around deforestation and the lack of respect for our environment?
I think, first of all, I'd like to thank government because it has appointed a minister coordinating the Sustainable Development Goal around sustainable industrialization. Okay, overall it's sustainable development, but within that we have things around sustainable industrial development. I think that is very, very important. Now, it's a bit of a catch-22 because, first of all, we need industrialization on one hand, and all government policies are actually aimed at promoting industrialization, while on the other hand, it comes with certain undesired consequences. Now, what is important is that these are centrally coordinated, and I think that's what government has done by appointing, I'm sorry to say, Honorable Mayor Karolo Okurut, who is now coordinating the Sustainable Development Goal. Now, within that, we need to ensure that there is sufficient mechanism to monitor the industrial development that is taking place. For instance, the speaker talked about the social impact assessments. Are those social impact assessments being followed? Then there is also all the issues that come with emissions. There are issues that come with dumping, littering. There are issues that come with the construction of those, with industrialization in wetlands, in forests. Are all those being monitored? And that's why I'm saying it's important they're not monitored by a single agency. I think right now we are much more focusing on Neymar, but they have to be monitored centrally. And that's what I'm hoping that the Honorable Mayor Okurut or the person in that position will do. Now that's one. Then secondly, I think we also need to ensure that we have smart technologies, low carbon emission industries. I think there is also a certain forum where we need to link in and make sure that we benefit from the incentives that are given to industries with low carbon emissions. We have to build alliances with the green movement worldwide, which actually is against industries which promote excessive emissions. So I think there is a wide range of things that we need to look at. And I think this is, again, not just the responsibility of Parliament. It is, as I said, something which needs to be coordinated centrally, but also we need to build an active populace, which is concerned about environmental degradation as a result of industrialization. And unless we achieve that, there is always a threat of lenience on one side because, first of all, government is interested in industries, and then secondly, industries themselves are interested in maximizing profits. And in the event of maximizing profits, I think they can employ all technologies that are available to them, which can help them to maximize profit. So I think that's where we need to start on this issue.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Let me come to you, PS, as the accounting officer. Water and environment sector is challenged by limited coordination of government decisions, which is a bit different from the uncoordinated troop movement that we were discussing here with the Honorable Member of Parliament. What specific measures are being put in place to ensure that decisions made in other sectors do not undermine the integrity of water and environment? Looking at, for example, Ministry of Lands, Ministry of Agriculture, how do we have a harmonization of this coordination?
Thank you, Maurice. Really, the areas that are greatly affected are wetlands, the forests, and then the shores of the water bodies. And as a ministry, we have developed, for example, the water atlas. We also have the forestry one, and we have also coded wetlands. And these have been shared, for example, with the Ministry of Lands, and also with the local governments, and specifically the district land boards, so that in the process of actually utilizing the resources at the local level, they take cognizance and do not actually get into appropriating the wetlands, the forests, and the river banks. Some districts have been diligent in doing that, but unfortunately, a number of them have not. And I think it is a challenge which going forward we are addressing. And we have also requested all districts to make sure that the natural resources officers at district level are ex officio when it comes to, for example, the district land board, because they know where the wetlands are, they know where the forests are, they know where the shores of the water bodies should end. Therefore, involving them in this process helps to stop actually encroachment into this fragile ecosystem. We have also worked especially with the local governments through the catchment management committees, which we set up, and this actually contains all the people in that particular catchment, from local leaders, religious leaders, elders, the youth, the elected officials, so that they decide on the development in that particular catchment. So in that way, we are actually penetrating them and trying to make sure that these other forests, wetlands, and the water body banks are actually preserved. And where this has been taken seriously, like in some parts of the Ruizi catchment, in Awoja, we have actually seen regeneration of wetlands and actually serious conservation efforts being realized. But I think also with the oncoming of NDP 3, the ministry is going to have a lot more say in terms of the management and the resource utilization associated with the management and conservation. So we are going to work with the other sectors and ministries to make sure that the resources that they're going to get and use for conservation or development of water sources actually go for those particular purposes, because we'll act as the coordinating center, as a secretariat. And I think that will give us a holistic view of the water and environment sector to make sure that the resources that the other sectors want to utilize, indirectly or indirectly, pertaining to water and environment, actually end up there. So I think with that it will help. Also, the climate change has been integrated, and actually the budget demands that all the ministries make sure that all the infrastructure that they are developing, all the programs they have are actually climate smart. And I think this goes a long way to address some of these silos that has happened in the government sector.
All right. Thank you very much. Another question for you just before I let you go. The economy will continue to depend on the available stock of water, of course, the environment and the natural resources to produce goods or even deliver services to our people. How is the ministry positioning itself to support the country to realize these aspirations? Is enough being done? And what more needs to be done to ensure that this is actually realized?
Yes, as a country, our growth and development is actually going to be natural resource led, for quite a number of years to come. And specifically for the Ministry of Water and Environment, directly we want to ensure that we enhance the resilience of our people involved in agriculture. And specifically for water production, we are focusing on irrigation. We have the irrigation policy, which is in place. We are developing the irrigation master plan. And we are also setting up demonstration so that farmers can see that with demonstration, with irrigation, which is affordable using solar etc., you're able to produce all year round and increase your productivity probably about 5-6 times, and therefore also your income. But we also want to make sure that whatever development we do, we take care of the environment. We take care of the environment. We take care of the environment. Because if we don't do it, then all these gains that we are looking for will not happen. So conservation is integral. And as mentioned, I just want to emphasize, this is not a responsibility of Neymar or the ministry. This actually starts with the individual. Because if you're able to conserve your environment individually, then the matter is sorted. Everybody would therefore have a more secure and a better environment. And again, the integration of climate change into the development agenda of the country, together with the oncoming of NDP3, I think will strengthen the ministry's arms in actually ensuring that this happens. But also on our part, we want to make sure that the development that we carry out as a country, as a ministry, is integrated. We don't go and do just a sport development, but let it be integrated so that it is not only for development, but it also takes care of the environment, it takes care of the well-being of the person in the local.
All right. Thank you very much, PS. I'll come back to you, and very shortly I will invite my colleague Mildred to take on the second session. But before I do that, I want to come back to you, Chair of NPA, Pamela. So if our technical team can give us Pamela Mbabazi again. And Pamela, as Pamela is joining us, I want to mention that if you have any questions or comments and you're online, please go into the comments section, post your question. Our Secretariat will share these comments with us and questions, and we should be able to ask the team that is here and that is online. All right, so if I have Pamela Mbabazi, Pamela, I wanted to ask you just one more question because I have a few more minutes for this first particular session. Pamela, I don't know if you're still with us. Pamela? All right, okay, Pamela is not with us. So I'll come back to Honorable Kefa, just yourself and the PS. I have a couple of more questions. If you could keep them short so I could use up my 4 minutes. Let's look at the question on financial resources allocated to water and environment. And having looked at the presentation by Dr. Fred Muhumuza, it's quite interesting because most of the time the budget allocations do not necessarily speak, as even the NPA chair was saying, do not speak to the plans. So the budget and the plans are not harmonized. But let's talk about how the budget, financial resources allocated to water and environment as a percentage of the national budget have been reducing over the last few years. If the sector is indeed important to Uganda, then why are we seeing this trend?
Okay, well, it's a challenge, and I must start by saying that I find that myself frustrating, because water should be prioritized, as clearly explained by our keynote speaker. But there is one thing also which I think we should understand. I think first of all, we look at it as a percentage of the entire budget. But there is a problem that the budget we talk about sometimes is not available. Sometimes I think, for instance, right now we are talking about a budget of over 40 trillion. But about 10 trillion of that is for debt servicing. So it's not available for allocation for services. So we are playing within the budget allocation of just 30 trillion. Now, again, Parliament is often blamed for not prioritizing prioritizing certain areas. Okay, in this instance, water. But there is a problem that often we are presented with a fait accompli. I think it was yourself who mentioned that the budgeting process has now started. Now they go through the budgeting process, and then they bring to us what is actually finished, already allocated by the Ministry of Finance. Now, there is a missed opportunity there because the NGOs, the key stakeholders who are interested in this area should be working hard to make sure that the allocation is influenced at each of those stages. Now, in Parliament, what's normally brought to us is just for review. And I must say that sometimes even the sector has, not necessarily water, but some sectors have a funny way of doing it. Sometimes you find that something should be a priority. It should have been added there. But it's left as an unfunded priority. And sometimes we've wondered whether it's left as an unfunded priority because they expect that it's a priority and therefore it will be prioritized by the Ministry of Finance, and others which are less of a priority will not be prioritized. So I don't know, I'm just thinking aloud.
All right.
It looks like somehow certain areas which are key priorities are left out, left unfunded. And that's what we are battling with. Then you find that in Parliament we try to jiggle the figures around, and that the executive has not been happy about that. And there's a big debate as to whether, as Parliament, we can rearrange the budgets or we just have to pass it as presented.
I know there is a huge debate on appropriation, which is happening, on why you should be given, how much power Parliament should be given on appropriation.
Yeah.
Yes. Quickly.
But I need to emphasize that it's very important that the key stakeholders, everybody who is interested in this, that you understand the process, that you try to start working around prioritizing this. Sometimes we've had the presentations from the NGO sector, but they come in late, sometimes even after we've had the interface with the ministries.
Yes.
I think when I worked a bit with the NGO sector in the UK, we were influencing the process throughout, right from the beginning, right from the start of the process. And I think that's what we need to understand clearly in order to be able to ensure that the budgets are prioritized. But there's also another key thing which is missing in this whole budgeting process. First of all, I think as individual MPs, often we do not make our own manifestos.
Yes.
But they are manifestos made by our parties, political parties. Now, of course, I can proudly say that my political party has tried to prioritize certain things like pipe to water. We've invested money, much more money now in the National Water and Sewerage Corporation program called SCAP 200 for water in rural growth areas. We're investing money in gravity flow schemes. Now that's NRM, and also now in irrigation scheme, which the Permanent Secretary has talked about. Now, is there a way that the general populace, the activists, the stakeholders, is there a way that they can influence even other political parties to make sure that they prioritize funding for water? It's possible that it may be somehow for fun, if so to speak, but at least the party in power can borrow those ideas, or we in Parliament can borrow those ideas and see how best we can work with them. And probably in that way we can work towards increasing the money allocated for water or for this sector.
All right. Thank you very much. PS, I wanted to ask just one quick question, and I'm hoping my 2 minutes, you can try, and I've seen you're very brief, so I'm happy to ask this. Since we are talking about sustainable industrialization for inclusive growth, employment, and wealth creation, the whole issue around water and environment, your sector, what is it doing to increase household incomes and improved quality of life for our people?
Okay. Yes, Maurice, really, to put this in proper context, if you look at the jobs globally, 4 out of 5 heavily or moderately are water or depend on water. So that is how central it is. And therefore, the investment in water is absolutely critical. Actually, for every $1 million that you invest in water, from statistics, say from Latin America, it creates straight 100 jobs permanent and another 368 indirectly. So this is just a straight path that this sector can do for any economy. And in Africa, if we can only invest in small-scale facilities for water and sanitation, it is projected that the economic benefit is actually 5% of the continent's GDP, which is about $28 billion, and that is huge. So for us as a sector, as I mentioned, we are focusing on actually enhancing the resilience of our farmers first and foremost, and actually setting up demonstrations so that they learn more about using water for productive purposes. We are also giving them clean and reliable water closer to them, and also basic sanitation or improved sanitation so that their health is improved, therefore they become more productive. And I think that creates a lot of benefit for the country. But I think also the water itself, because of the technology we are using and trying to optimize, we are actually reducing the costs of production. And I think my appeal to everybody who is consuming this service is that pay up so that it can go back to actually expand the services. So it is extremely central, and there's a lot that we are doing that will certainly create jobs, create wealth, and create development for the country.
All right, thank you very much, PS. I want to invite Mildred to come and take us through this second session that has both the panelists on the virtual network Zoom and here in the room with Godba Tumshabe. So over to you, Mildred. We will come back for a dialogue on some of the questions and comments that will be coming through the online platforms. So if you're online, do not take off. Please do share your question. We should be able to come back to that in our last 30 minutes. Oh, Pamela, I see you're back. I'll come back to you. I'll come back to you later. Let me ask Mildred. Please don't go anywhere, Pamela.
Thank you very much, Morris. We'll definitely be taking about 30 minutes or so for this. For our next panel, and like Morris did say, two of our panelists are definitely away from here. And I want to start off with Mr. Godba Tumshabe. And Godba, I clearly know that there are a number of government institutions mandated to pay attention to the natural resources of Uganda, including water as well, for sustainable management. What's your view on the kind of work they're doing in this regard?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mildred, and salutations to the ministry, the minister, the PS, and your team for organizing this event, which is, I think, very, very important. Let me start off by sharing with you a very small experience, which is a case, and I think I would want to invite the PS to come to Ntungamo. One of these days, I'll host you,
okay,
and you don't have to find a hotel or even buy lunch. This is the case that there is a wetland that is supposed to be passing through Ntungamo town. In 1998, you remember there was a very big drought. And the largest part of that wetland was decimated. And because I owned land there, I was able to preserve just a small part of it. That small part still exists. It has now grown to like about 1 kilometer. The remaining part in Ntungamo municipality was attacked and decimated recently. The president went down there, he normally attends church in Ntungamo, and gave an order that everybody who had encroached on that wetland should be evicted and the wetland restored. What for me is striking is that the entire government infrastructure has ignored the president, and people have continued to basically take over that wetland because they have drained it. For me, that case in Ntungamo basically tells me about the crisis that we are facing as a country. And remember that the vice president, when he read the president's speech, it was almost an indictment of what we have not done as a country. Because if you have forest reserves that have forest cover that has declined up to about 13%, I think we heard about how wetlands have been degraded. So the question that we need to be able to ask ourselves is, why are we where we are? Because we are here, we've been working, the institutions are there. Why are we where we are? In my view, the sole and fundamental business of the Ministry of Water and Environment and the institutions under it is essentially the preservation of the integrity of the environment, which what we call ecosystem integrity. That is the core business. In fact, even the discussion about how you create jobs, how you industrialize, that's a secondary business, because there are agencies of government that are supposed to be doing that. At the core of the ministry's mandate is, are you able to establish and sustain the integrity of the ecosystem, of water ecosystems, of wetland ecosystems, of forest ecosystems in this country? How do you do it? There are about 4 things that one would have to be looking at the institutions in this sector they should be doing. It's about the legal and policy, where I think we've done a lot of things since the 1990s, 1994. A lot of work has been done in that area. And I think as Pamela said earlier, the problem is lack of compliance and law enforcement. Number 2 is about the technical capacity, the technical know-how, the technology to be able to manage these resources. How much have we invested in the technical competencies of individuals and skills and the technology to be able to harness these resources to produce the goods and services that we need? Have we been able to achieve that? I mean, the interesting thing is that even when we have a lot of water here, it becomes a crisis for us. We cry because we don't have water. We also cry because we have a lot of water. I think as a people, we must be able to reflect and say, where are the institutions that are supposed to be dealing with this? The third aspect is the financing. And Fred, in his address, talked about this quite elaborately. I mean, I find this quite intriguing because I've been working in this sector for the last over 20 years. The financing debate has been there, as far as I know. And it's I sympathize with Chairman Kefa, because you talk as, you are crying like me, an ordinary citizen. You are an MP who has authority, even an MP of the ruling party, and you are appealing to activists to help the ruling party to influence it. But there must be something fundamentally wrong with us as a people, that even when we know what to do, we can't do it. Let me just add this intervention with one last point. That I teach environmental law at the law school at Makerere. And I teach my students that there are 3 levels in which you achieve ecosystem integrity. The first level is what we call rationality. You start by assuming that human beings are rational, the way the chairman was talking about. You assume that human beings are rational, so they want to go and cut down forests. They want to live in wetlands like crocodiles. So they are rational, so they want to do the wrong things. So that is the first level. When rationality fails, then you appeal to morality. So in other words, people begin to look at this and say it's immoral to go and degrade a wetland, for an industry to go and drain a wetland and set up an industry, or a farmer, an individual person like me, to go and cut to downgrade a wetland. So that is the second one, the morality. When there is a moral breakdown, normally you appeal to religious leaders, to clergy leaders. They are the ones who are qualified to instill morals. The third one is what we call law enforcement and compliance. When rationality has failed and morality has failed, the state comes in and enforces the law and makes sure that everybody is in order, does what they have been, what the law requires them to do. Right now, what is frustrating is that you see government agencies and government officials almost crying because they cannot do what they are supposed to do. So in other words, if there is one fundamental problem we are faced with now, it is the absolute absence of the state. In fact, right now in this country, people spend more time and money either trying to break or circumvent the law than to comply. And I can tell you that the costs of compliance to environmental law in this country is very high. So, in conclusion, I want to state categorically that the institutions for environmental management in this country are in limbo. They are smart people, smart men and women, struggling and trying every day to do a lot of work, but the political economy within which they are operating does not enable them to do what is needed to ensure the integrity of the environment. And that is definitely evidenced on this panel, where the chairman of a parliamentary committee, ordinary chairman of a parliamentary committee, would summon an industry practitioner or a local government and say, why have you not done this job? But the day you start appealing to ordinary people like me and Mildred and others, then you know that you are faced with a real-time crisis.
Well, Godba, you talked about the aspect of financing, which is very, very key. I mean, money moves quite a number of things. You can have the plans, you can have the laws, but without the money to enforce implementation or something like that, it won't come to pass. Now, what would be your advice to the Ministry of Water and Environment to ensure that they attract the necessary attention from government to be able to look at aspects of funding as a priority? Because it baffles my mind to talk about things like unfunded priorities. I thought priorities should actually be getting the adequate and necessary funding.
Actually, I don't think that's a very relevant question, Mildred. Because one of the problems we are having with government actually today is that every sector comes as if there is a government somewhere, and for it is somewhere.
Okay.
That's how they come. So, in other words, the Minister of Water and Environment will say, government has refused to give us money. But the Minister of Water and Environment is not an NGO.
It's part.
It's the government. So, in other words, if we go back to what Pamela said earlier, that the government has prioritized environment and water sector. How do you prioritize and then come back and say the sector is not funded? What exactly is the problem? Incidentally, I should mention that in this country, there are two important sectors that especially Chairman Kefa, who talks to the chairman of NRM, you may want to talk to him about.
Okay.
Education, environment, and water. These two sectors need to be prioritized the way the president prioritizes defense and security. Because I think education is the pathway to transformation. You cannot deal with it as a by the way. Water and environment are our strategic security resources. I mean, you can have all kinds of weaponry. You can have jet fighters and cruise missiles and everything. The day your population cannot feed itself, or you cannot feed your population, you know that your entire defense architecture has collapsed. So, Mr. Chairman, you have an opportunity in your position to be able to say, we are prioritizing defense and security. In the NDP3, we are saying we are prioritizing water and environment. Then put your money where your mouth is.
All right, thank you very much. Maybe before I move on to the next panelist, Honorable Kefa's response to some of the points you've given.
I think where my colleague panelist, I think, is missing the point. I think, first of all, we should understand that government sits on three pillars: the parliament, and then the judiciary, and then the executive. Now, the judiciary can also say they are part of government, but I don't think they are involved in implementation. I think parliament also is part of government. Now, for us as parliament, our role is representation, and we represent the views of the ordinary people. I think the best parliamentarian is the one who most effectively represents the views of the poor, who are voiceless. Then we do the legislation, and I think we've done very well on the side of legislation. And I would be very happy to hear if there is anything that is missing that we should be thinking about. Then we do with the issue of appropriation of budget. Now, we need to understand the process of appropriation of budget. And that's where I was saying that actually in most cases, we are presented with budgets in the final stages. And then lastly, we do the oversight. Now, in doing that, Parliament is somehow overseeing what the executive is doing. Now, in that work, and I think this is where we're appealing for everybody's support. First of all, you need to appreciate that we are part of the population. We are not part of the executive. And in so doing, often we have certain limitations. Sometimes we don't have access to all the information. And at times we are helped by whistleblowers who draw us to certain facts by bringing certain information before us, which can help us in the decision making. And I think honorable colleague here should very much appreciate that point and appreciate that we really need help. Without the information, then we may not be able to act. Then the second issue that we often have is the limited participation in the actual financial planning processes, which is a very elaborate process. But also apart from that, there are also other areas of grant making, such obtaining grants, loans. Often in a parliament, we are presented with the loans to approve. We don't initiate the loans that should be brought to parliament. I think that's another area also. And I think it may be very helpful if somehow a way can be found how parliament can get much better involved in that. Then there is also limited opportunities. We have also limited opportunity of monitoring the actual budget implementation. I think the ministry will come to us with often very sophisticated papers, and they present what they are presenting. But unless we have somebody helping us and telling us that this is what's happening here, I think it's very difficult for us to change things around. So somehow we are presented with a straitjacket within which we have to work. And lastly, it's also very important to bear in mind that we're often faced with competing priorities. And unless all these issues are appreciated, and then the role of everybody as a stakeholder in this sector is appreciated, and everybody plays his role, I think it's very difficult just to push it to Parliament and expect that we'll work miracles on the other hand. Oh, yes, we can summon the ministry officials, we can summon the agencies, but again, our interaction with them will be limited, subject to what information we have. And I hope you appreciate where I'm coming from.
Well, it will take us a bit of time for Godber to actually appreciate that point that point right there. But I'll be coming back to you, gentlemen. I'd like to engage Honorable Eli Karuhanga, the chairman of the Private Sector Foundation Uganda, PSFU, and of course, our technical team will be getting him to us, and I hope he can be able to hear us, particularly. Honorable Eli, we would like to get it from you, how important water and environment resources are for the private sector development and growth, and what sort of incentives would you need as the private sector to ensure that we can get more of you from the sector investing in environment and water resources?
Thank you, Mildred. First, you and I would not be here if there is no water. Second, any country, many countries are successful, others are failures, others are stagnant. But what is the secret of the success of those countries? There must be things that must be done right. So with this COVID, Uganda has had an opportunity to think. And one of the things we are thinking about now for a whole week, organized by the ministry and government, is water. So water and air are freely available in Uganda. Air is being taken advantage of by MTN, Airtel, and the communication companies, and they're making billions by selling airtime. In our case with water, we have to recognize some facts. One is that Lake Victoria is the treasure, is the biggest treasure of our country that God gave us. Two is that Uganda is the most freshwater networked country in the world after DRC. Three is that we have not exploited even the large water body for tourism, for entertainment, for good life, even for fishing. The president said 1 week ago, I think, that from fish maw alone, the bladder of Imputa, Nile Patch, we can make more money than Saudi Arabia gets out of its oil and gas. So what actually has been the challenge? We in private sector would like to play a role with you, but how do we do it? Why don't we do the example that the government has already shown? First, on oil and gas, they made oil and gas a commodity. And they set up institutions to sell this commodity. So did they do with electricity. Why don't we think that water is also a commodity, a strategic commodity, an incredible present from God to Uganda, and utilize it and make sure that when the next wars of water come, we have sorted ourselves out and nobody can take it away from us. I am seeing challenges in Ethiopia and Egypt. I am seeing Egypt is the biggest irrigating nation in Africa, feeding its people, exporting cotton products to us. The other day we were in a retreat with private sector at the Serena, and the napkins were made in Egypt, all irrigated cotton. The time has come for us now to make this. I want to thank the government, by the way. About 20 years ago, I was a member of parliament in a dry corridor area. And my constituency had a lake called Lake Kumuro. Lake Kumuro was a national park, but my pastoralists had overrun the park, had overrun Lake Kumuro, and there was no more Lake National Park, Lake Kumuro National Park, because there was no water. I fought very hard as a member of parliament at that time, together with the government. Lake Kumuro is the closest, most beautiful national park close to Kampala right now, because there was an intervention, because we had to provide water and encourage water and bring awareness to the people to do dams in their areas. This has been a fantastic success story. There is this thing, this English word, which is not normally used, but which I'm very fond of myself, is called epiphany. In my language, it means okushoboorokerwa. A sudden realization and awakening and solving a complicated puzzle of life, and you find a solution to it. I think if we used our time now in this whole week and address the issue of how can we make our country a winning nation, one of the successful nations, I'm looking at water. And I'm thanking the government so far for the efforts done at the National Water and Sewerage Corporation with its leadership there. I am thanking the minister, the president, the PS, although unfortunately the PS, your mask was making it very difficult for me to hear you, my friend. And I know you were making very good points. But you had a very nice technical mask, but I didn't hear you a lot. But the people who work with you in that department, I have been following them since being a member of parliament. I cannot believe the transformation at the Department of Water. I would like to hail your efforts. But what we need now is to say what my friend from civil society has said. Let's see how we can get private sector to play a role. If tomorrow somebody, I was talking to Engineer Kimanzi, I think one of your directors, and he told me in Israel, there are two issues which they think it's water and markets. Once a country has water, then they can do everything else except they have to look for markets. Now, in our situation, we don't have to go to the extent which Israel goes to look for water. God gave it to us. All we need to do now is to harness it in an organized, well thought out manner. Like the Eritrea National Water and Housing and the department has done, finding that we can get piped clean water to villages, and we still have a lot of work to do. But what I'm looking for is how can we turn this resource into a most efficient, well-provided, and I'm hoping that at the end of this week, this time, there will be a good epiphany. We shall get a sudden reawakening. We were chatting with the engineer Kimanzi. If somebody brought $100 million today in Uganda from private sector and said, I want to participate in irrigation, what is it that the government has put in place to receive this investor? What is there? What is there? Now, one of the things that irrigation will make our country so beautiful. I am from, as you know, I'm chairman. We are running a 90-day campaign sensitizing people about oil and gas and what is going to happen. As I speak to you, our president is in Tanzania, finalizing with his colleague on the pipeline, I hope. We have 90 days of daily campaigning to make Ugandans participate in oil and gas. We have a challenge. At Tereng, we are going to have about one camp, just one, because there are going to be many camps, Kingfish. One camp would have 5,000 people. We've calculated how many tomatoes are required to supply that camp, how many onions, how many eggs, how much fish, and who is going to supply this sustainably during the dry season. So these things, water is it, and we have it. What we want, we as private sector, is to work with government, to work together, so that the tomatoes are supplied by a Ugandan. Believe me, if you wake up tomorrow to go to Nakasero market, you will find that all these things I'm talking about, the foods, the mangoes, are from Kenya, are from South Africa, the apples. It doesn't take much for a country to be a winning nation. It doesn't take much for a country to be one of those successful countries. Kenya and Ethiopia are setting up certain big areas, earmarking them, kind of like a zone for agriculture. They provide the water, and they ask investors to do this. So people come and invest, they grow flowers, they fly them, they have markets for them. We have water. So why don't we work as a team and make Uganda the most beautiful, as God decided? It is beautiful. Why don't we also make the people in Uganda have employment? Because you can imagine, if one has a dam, how many people you employ if you are irrigating, and how many people will come back home.
All right,
and how we can use this water
I'd like
to reach
cut
the
you
people,
short.
and how we can create urban areas. So thank you, but there's a lot to say.
Yes, Honorable.
I want to conclude by thanking the UNDP for the job we have been doing together with private sector. We have already reached more than 65 companies whom we are working with to make sure that they understand the management of environment, the water wastage, water resources, and UNDP has really played a role. I also want to thank the National Planning Authority under Pamela. You are doing a great job, and the presentation by my friend Dr. Muhumza was simply spot on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable, we'll be getting back to you if time does allow in just a bit. I would like now to engage Ms. Elsie Atafwa, who is the UNDP resident representative for Uganda. Ms. Atafwa, we would like to know from you, what's your take on the common notion that actually water and environment resources are at the core of sustainable development, and how best do you think Uganda can ensure that these resources are developed and managed in order to effectively ensure and contribute to the achievement of now the National Development Plan 3?
Well, thank you very much, Mildred, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you for inviting me, and by extension, UNDP and the United Nations family. This is really at the heart of what we do, and this is really at the heart of sustainable development. But Mildred, if you permit me, let me start off with a quotation from Kofi Annan, which is very, very important. And I read, "Only by understanding the environment and how it works can we make the necessary decisions to protect it. Only by valuing all our precious natural and human resources can we hope to build a sustainable future." In other words, water and environment, which is part of our ecosystem, sits at the heart of sustainable development and sits at the heart of the National Development Plan. Now, let me try to unpack sustainable development, because sometimes when people hear it, they think it's in the air. We are looking at three dimensions of it. We're looking at the social dimensions, we are looking at the economic dimension, and we are looking at the environmental dimension. And this have to be looked at together. So when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which Uganda has signed up to, all 17 of them, none of them can be fulfilled without the environment and water. If you take poverty, no poverty, zero hunger, water and sanitation, SDG 6, SDG 13 on life on land, SDG 15 on climate action, even SDG 16 on peace, because we already see that there are conflicts over water resources in many countries. This is at the heart of what we do, and that's very important. So what is the relevance of water? What is the relevance of environment when it comes to the conversations that we're having? And let me try to bring it in focus. And I'll articulate 4 areas of work and try to wrap up looking at the way forward. First, let's look at water and tourism, for example. A number of African countries, and I think Ellie alluded to that, and Uganda is one of them, our tourism is nature-based. When people come here, they come to look at the crested crane, for example. Where is the crested crane? The crested crane sits on the wetlands. When people come here, they come to look at the crater lakes. When people come here, they come to see the beautiful forests that we have. And so when you destroy the forest, the animals go. And when the animals go, there are no tourism. Now, don't forget, tourism is the highest contributor of GDP in the country. And we can even see the impact of COVID on tourism as I speak now. So what am I saying? There's a close intersection between tourism in terms of the socio-economic development of the country. It's creating jobs, it's creating livelihoods. Let's break it in focus when we talk about agriculture. And I think a number of people alluded to agriculture already, so I'm not going to spend more time on that. We cannot talk about poverty eradication, wealth creation without focusing on agriculture and water. You need water for agriculture. Even the simple concept of pollination. When the environment is destroyed, the bees go, and when the bees go, you cannot have pollination, which is useful for agriculture. In other words, we need to start connecting the dots. When people think environment, they think water, they think, oh, it's there, it's abandoned somewhere, it's on the periphery. But this is at the core of national development processes. And so to support the smallholder irrigation processes, we need to look at the intersection between water and agriculture. Now, let me also bring it in focus, water and energy. We produce 80.4% of our electricity from hydro. What does it mean? You cannot talk about industrialization. You cannot talk about private sector empowerment. You cannot talk about livelihoods without looking at energy in any given context. So it's quite important for us to see that when we protect water, and I think His Excellency, the Vice President, talked about it, when we're beginning to see, because of degradation of ecosystems resources, we're beginning to see a shift in the wetlands, which is impacting on the infrastructure that government has invested in. So it's important for us to begin to see those intersections as we move forward. And finally, the one point that I wanted to conclude on is on the health dimension. Now, in the COVID era, and I think the PS can talk about that, we can see the importance of water and sanitation to the prevention agenda when it comes to the health component of the COVID agenda. We need water to wash hands, we need clean water, we need accessible water. But even when you look at the intersection between health and environment, we can see a lot of people who have respiratory diseases because they have to use charcoal, and they use charcoal in a closed environment. You can then see that the government is spending millions of dollars on such non-communicable diseases. So, and we also see that water pollution increases the waterborne diseases. We tend to spend more water on it. So it's high time that, colleagues, friends, we begin to see where water and environment sit in national development processes. In other words, they perform a provisioning function. They provide food to us, they provide water to us, they provide electricity to us. Water and environment also provides for us regulatory services. In other words, when it's raining today, the wetlands are able to absorb the water and ensure flood control. They ensure soil erosion doesn't, cascade. So in other words, we need to begin to see all these interconnections as we are moving forward. But even when it comes to cultural services that environment provides and water provides, our history as Africans, our history as Ugandans, we depend a lot in terms of the inspiration that our culture gives us through the environment, through nature. And that's also an important piece of the conversation, even for the creative industry, which is becoming increasing. I just came from Fort Porter, where we're talking about the creative industry. We're beginning to see companies like Puma using the backcloth for shoes. And why not us? It's part of the creative industry. So we have to see all those intersections, the services that water and environment provides, and even the supporting services that provides to us all. There's a global function that water and environment provides to all of us. When it comes to climate point of view, it is a common good for us. It is a national good for us. What we are seeing is the degradation of resources, forest resources, wetland resources, and we need to take it back. In other words, in the post-COVID era, Mildred and colleagues, as we look into the recovery of the country, as we look into the resilience of the country, environment and water can no longer be at the periphery anymore. It has to be central. And I think Ellie talked about it. If there are three things that we have to focus on, we have to focus on environment, water, and education. And I just want to conclude by saying that it is high time that we see the connections. If you look at the 18 NDP programs, which Pamela talked about, it is not only the program on water and environment that is crucial. It is the program on agro-industrialization that is at the heart. It is the program on energy. It is even the program on governance, because when it comes to issues around water and environment, the governance of our water resources, the governance of our environmental resources becomes very key. So let me now shift to your second part of the question. What can we do? What can we do as Ugandans? Because this is at the heart of our national development. There are a couple of things that I wanted to submit, Mildred and colleagues. First, we need to provide incentives. It is very important. Incentives can take different forms. I'm not going to go into that, but we have to look at, for example, the fiscal incentives for the private sector. The second thing is to look at integrated approaches when we're dealing with these things. It is not for agriculture to expand into new areas of forestry when forestry is saying that, no, let's retain those lands and protect them. How do we work together? How do we harmonize policies? How do we look at the 18 programs in the NDP in an integrated way. The other thing we need to look at is the planning and budget. In most countries, including Uganda, whereas we know that environment, water produce services for us, sometimes they get about 1% of the national resource or 1.5%. How do we increase that and how do we optimize the use as well? And finally, I just wanted to touch on two quick things. Is our investment on knowledge sharing, technology. We need to curate. If something is happening in Mbarara that you need to replicate in Kampala, how are we sharing those and how are we creating those stories? Enforcement will be very key finally. Enforcement is not only Neymar, as people have been saying. We have to look at the traditional leaders. We have to even look at the religious leaders. We have to look at the civil society, the NGO, the community leaders, the youth who are going to be custodians of environment and water in the future. How do we bring them in the conversation moving forward? So just in the interest of time, these are a few things that I wanted to highlight. But overall, we need to look at a combination of incentives, a combination of investment, a combination of technology, and we also have to partner a lot, including with the private sector, where we need to help them to de-risk the investment that they have, because sometimes that is also able to cause degradation in terms of their value chain. So this is what I wanted to say, at least in the interim. Thank you.
Very much, Ms. Elsie Atafwa. If time allows, we'll definitely be coming back to you. But just to wrap up with the panel right here at Luzira, the Ministry of Water. Godba, I'd like to come to you. We know that the civil society has engaged quite a lot in ensuring the management and development of water and resources. But just what more moving forward can you be able to do as the civil sector, now that we even have NDP3 in action?
I think civil society just needs to keep on doing a lot of what they have been doing. Because when we talk about civil society, sometimes we run the danger of just lumping up everything. Civil society in different areas can be grouped into broader three categories. There is civil society that engages in research, policy engagement. Their main focus is on how to generate new knowledge and improve public policy making and decision making. There is another strand of civil society that is focused mainly on accountability. And I think what Chairman Kefo was asking about, they act more or less like oversight organizations. They are looking at what government and the private sector are not doing right. You've seen many of them engaged in campaigns to save forests, to save wetlands, and quite in a majority of cases, they are trying to save them from government itself. Because in the case of Mabera Forest Reserve, our entire fight, where the current Minister of State for Environment was involved, it was a fight where government was acting as an agent of a private company. Sure. In the case of Butamera Forest Reserve, again, it was a private company, and government, particularly the then Department of Forestry, was essentially almost acting as an agent of a private company. So there is that strand of organization. Then there's the third strand, which is mainly in service delivery, engaged in tree planting, engaged in environmental awareness and education. So in other words, one has to look at those three strands of civil society. Right now, I can say that the first two strands, the research organizations and advocacy organizations, they are endangered by the increasing restrictions imposed by government. Because remember, at the end of the day, like the UNDP colleague said, the question of environment and water and natural resources is a political issue.
Sure.
Because politicians derive rent from these resources. If you go and if you want to go and do research on who is doing degradation of forests in this country, the most of the people engaged in illegal timber harvesting in our forest reserves, they are either public sector officials, but in most cases you'll find that they are private people linked to the political and military elite. And that's why the ministry people and the law enforcement officers, normally it's very difficult to deal with them. That's why you need Parliament to be the one to come in, because Parliament has certain powers. Chairman, you are denying the powers of Parliament. But Parliament in this country has essentially surrendered its power to the executive. That's basically part of the crisis that we are dealing with, that even the public sector officials, the ministry officials here, should be coming to Parliament to seek protection from an executive that is on rampage when they do things that should not be done. But because Parliament has surrendered its power to the executive, then you realize, oh, we can't budget. The constitution in this country, our constitution, gives the Parliament spending responsibilities. Yeah. When I pay my taxes, the executive collects that money. It is the Parliament that has the powers to appropriate. When you fail to appropriate and the executive tells you you can't change the budget, it is simply because you have surrendered that power, because the oversight function you mentioned, the budget instrument is supposed to be used as an instrument to ensure there is a proper functioning of the executive. So civil society, in my view, has done quite a lot in this country. Because of the democratic reversals that we have experienced, the civil society is as endangered as the environment itself. And therefore, there is need for civil society. I mean, we have to get you have to get a lot of courageous people to be able to do the work of environmental activism and environmental oversight. I'm sure if my friend Minister Anua was here, she would tell you the kinds of struggles she went through. But of course, sometimes when you cross over to the other political side, sometimes it's a bit comfortable. You forget about the pains that you suffer on this side. So at the end of the day, citizens must understand that the environment is all that we have. Environment and water is all that we have. Okay. And we have to be demanding from government and government agencies to do their work. We can do our part, but government and government agencies have to do their work.
All right, thank you very much, Godba. And in just a minute, I'll be inviting Morris to come and close off this particular session. But I have just one more extra question to Honorable Eli Karuhanga as we get into this. I think it was hinted on in the keynote address from Dr. Fred Muhumuza, the aspect of briquettes. And this comes also from part of the presentation from His Excellency, the Vice President, that 90% of us Ugandans actually use charcoal, firewood, charcoal. And I know many of us here should be getting very, very judgmental upon ourselves, that we ourselves are talking about protecting the environment, and somehow, knowingly or unknowingly, we are degrading the environment. I've met in touch, Honorable Eli, with a team, I think they're called West Gang Crew, particularly looking at making briquettes out of the West. And West is also increasingly becoming part of the challenges for our environment when you look at the landfills and everything. As the private sector, I'm bringing this in collaboration with you, talking about the challenges and opportunities that water and environment resources do present to the private sector.
Well, I'm not so sure that I heard you very well, but I just want you to understand that government will never do all these things alone without private sector. And unlike my friend from civil society who says they are an endangered species, for us private sector, we are a thriving species, because there is no way government can do any of these things without us. We do all the research and development, for example, in the management of the environment, and make sure that our forests are not destroyed. We can apply gas. Now we found gas in Uganda. We can import gas. We can have clean energy. And as I said earlier on with our friends from UNDP, we are working together on making sure that we are in green business, and we are helping out with private sector. Also, in private sector, we can translate the water commodity into the market, and we can work as consultants with government. We can work with government. In fact, if you see all the work that the National Water and Housing and National Water and Sewage Construction are doing, even with the ministry, so many people from private sector are taking all these tenders to execute this work. And we have projects which will make sure that our environment is protected. My take on this, as we stand now, the emphasis I would like to conclude in this whole debate is to be able to convince the people in government, convince the people in parliament, my colleague, honorable member, to convince His Excellency the President and his cabinet that private sector will be the key player in uplifting our environment and create an atmosphere where we can protect the environment, protect our forests, make sure that the cooking is, you know, here on, right now I am here on my farm, and we are using biogas from cow dung. It's the one which makes my tea, it's the one which makes people here happy. We no longer go around collecting firewood. This is a big step in our country. The fact that cow dung can be used to prepare our food, all of us. It's a step in the direction, but this is all from private sector. So I know that we are working together with the National Planning Authority in NDP3, and I know for sure that this is a very serious address. In fact, we have a project in PSFU exactly addressing the issue you have raised, Mildred, and we are very proud of it, although it's coming to the tail end, but we already have made sufficient inroads in this aspect. I am positive that the government will appreciate what private sector is determined to do. We are setting up a think tank together with government through National Planning Authority, and I'm sure that we'll work out a post-COVID solution to our country to make Uganda a successful country.
Thank you very much, Chairman Eli Karuhanga. I want the technical team to prepare Pamela for me. I want her to give us some of her takeaway notes. I'll begin here as you prepare Pamela. Honorable Kefa, please start us off. This is the beginning of a week-long activities around the week and the Water and Environment Week. Your takeaway from this e-conference?
I think I'd like to once again emphasize the need, just like Chairman Karuhanga was saying, the need for the private sector, the need for the civil society, and other interested stakeholders coming together. And I think it's very, very important that we understand, for instance, if we are talking about budget allocation to the sector, it's very important that we understand the process of budget allocation, and then we work out how is each one of us helping to influence that process. And I think you shouldn't be mistaken to think that Parliament will do it at the tail end of it.
All right.
The other thing also, which I'll be very keen to see, and I said this from my background of working with the NGO sector for over 20 years. And over that period, I had the opportunity of leading an umbrella organization for NGOs in UK. It's very important that the NGO build their capacity, that they provide effective representation. I think just like us, members of parliament representing the ordinary people, even the civil society has that opportunity of representing the ordinary people. It's very important that they build their advocacy capacity, and also it's very important that they recruit working allies across sectors, in parliament, in the Ministry of Finance, in the Ministry of Water itself. And I think unless we appreciate that and work around achieving it, it's going to be very difficult. And hopefully, by the end of all this, we'll have appreciated the need for better enforcement of the legislation that we've worked hard as Parliament to put in place, the need for better strengthened institutions. Of course, there is a challenge there, which we need to acknowledge. There is an element, I think, which hasn't come out. Some of the problems we are having around deforestation, wetland management, is as a result of lack of alternative income. So I think there is also need, and I think the civil society organizations can lead on that. And finally, it's very, very important that we up our game on sensitization of the masses.
All right. All right, thank you very much. I really would like to request that we get an additional 5 minutes from our TV stations, UBC and NBS, because I'll still need to get some takeaway notes from our panelists online. So I'll come to you, Pamela. And Pamela, you have a minute, because I'm really managing my time. You have a minute, and we are talking about, how feasible is NDP3 and what needs to be done to ensure that water and environment take quite the priority they deserve in NDP3.
Right. Thank you, Maurice. Very briefly, I will emphasize the point that we must ensure a program approach. If we're going to ensure that we handle issues of water and environment in this country, we have to work together. I think that point has been stressed by everybody. We need to take it loud and clear and begin implementing that. I think that, of course, training and ensuring that we build capacity and ensure that there is the requisite human resource is very essential. I think Mr. Godber mentioned that. Again, we can't continue playing lip service on that. We need a critical mass of civil servants that will ensure service delivery and ensure that we really mean what we say. Emphasizing the issue of aligning our budget to the plan is important because we have prioritized this of water and environment, and we must make sure we follow through by apportioning the right amount of funding that is requisite and necessary for us to have an impact. But in terms of what is the take home, really, I want to rally, all stakeholders, ranging from government agencies, development partners, indeed the private sector, but even average Ugandans. We must ensure that we join our efforts and ensure that we implement the National Development Plan. Because if we can at least achieve 80% of our targets, I think we will be able to achieve sustainable development. And this will enable us ensure that whatever we do works for the people, works for the environment, and works for the economy. I thank you.
Pamela, all right. And Pamela, thank you for replying all our online questions, because you had quite some questions online on Zoom, and thanks for engaging those online and replying all those questions. Thank you. For PS, I'll come to you very quickly. You also have a minute. How is first of all, the sector responding to the current challenges caused by COVID-19, the rising water levels, and job losses related to both?
I think maybe I move this.
And job losses in your sector. Don't speak to job losses in other sectors due to COVID.
Yes. I think, Maurice, I think first let me clarify on something, okay? Because there is probably some talk or insinuation that government is in limbo, is doing nothing about environment, which I think is not correct. We all see in the media, print, audio, and for all national functions, the head of state is always emphasizing on environment issues. The Speaker of Parliament, the Prime Minister, all those are actually what? Talking about environment. And we actually have directives that we are implementing, and we have agreed that we should start by sensitization of the people to voluntarily vacate the wetlands or those who are living within the boundaries of the water bodies. And after that, we're going to have engagement of demarcation. And with the demarcation completed, those who would not have voluntarily left, then will have no option but to go through enforcement. We want this to be a very humane process. Our people are understanding, and we want to engage with them. Some of them have crops already in those particular wetlands. So we don't want also to be like people who are completely insensitive. So this is a process. It may take a little bit of time, maybe 6, 7, or 8 months, but it has started and it will happen.
Godber says start with Ntungamo, so you will come to his village first. All right.
Yes. Now, when it comes to COVID and job creation, but let me just talk about COVID and the rising water issue. For COVID, water is central and sanitation is crucial. Our focus is to make sure that the most vulnerable have access to water. And we have also been soft not to disconnect people. But you must pay for the water, please. This is not a waiver of your obligation to pay. You must pay for this water. We have also set up hygiene facilities in most places where we operate and extensions to the critical facilities to make sure that we are able to serve our people who are affected by COVID. And we have come up with standard operating practices that we have translated into all the local languages that concern water and sanitation, and we have distributed them freely, and we have also engaged with the religious leaders to help us on that. I think on the rising water level, the directive that I talk about actually answers it. And we are engaging with the local governments and the communities to tell them that where you are settled is actually part and parcel of the water. So please leave it. Fishermen have seen what has happened to the fishing villages, which were set right in the water. You don't have to leave where you work anyway. So the fishing village should be far away, and you do your fishing in the water. And these are the kind of engagements that we're doing with the people, but also we have an interministerial committee that is going to come up with a long-term solution, an investment costed plan that will go towards addressing the challenges of flooding and rising water level.
All right, thank you very much, PS. I'll come to the UN resident representative, the UNDP resident representative, Elsie. Elsie, you have a minute. Your takeaway notes from this e-conference.
Sure, Maurice, for this, I want to say that the stars are aligned. We are in a crucial space where we're talking about the NDP3. We're in a crucial space where we're talking about post-COVID recovery. We're in a crucial space where we're talking about the sustainable development, the decade of action. So for me, the takeaway is that environment and water needs to be at the center of development. And when we talk about leaving no one behind, which is about the principle of universality and reaching really the poorest of the poor and the vulnerable groups, water and environment, as we see, that links with agriculture, that links with tourism, that links with energy, that links with industrialization, is what is going to really propel us into that development. There are clear examples in different countries on how they have done it, and we can emulate that, including from looking at issues of, building green cities, which is great. We have to start thinking about the Kampalas and all the new cities that are coming up. How do we ensure that they integrate into them water and environment issues? We have to start looking into issues around innovative financing, for example. It's an important space that I wanted to highlight because a number of the speakers talked about financing. But financing is not only through the government budgets. We need to start looking at issues of green bonds, for example. Nigeria is doing that, for example. We have seen issues to do with performance-based payments based on environment. If you can deliver restoration, you are paid for that. We've seen it in Ecuador, we've seen it in Brazil, we've seen it in Indonesia. There's so many things that we can do. Someone talked about empowering the local government, and I think that's a crucial space as well. How do we integrate climate? How do we integrate environment? How do we integrate water into the national, the local government policy planning and budgetary processes? But above all, Maurice, as I conclude, we need to empower the custodians. We need to empower devolve rights to the people who can protect the environment. So the traditional leaders, the CSOs, the NGOs, we have to look at that. And finally, we have to look at innovative approaches. We can't be doing the same old things and expect different results. When Ellie talked about biogas, it's a new way of doing things. We are working with the Ministry of Energy on that. So for us as UNDP and the United Nations family, we just concluded a cooperation framework where we are looking at shared prosperity in a healthy environment. Water is one of those things. Environment is one of those things. As UNDP, we're also coming close to our old country program document. We're starting a new one. At the heart of that is natural resources. Overall, I want us as a people, as Ugandan, to start looking at environment differently. It is our core business, and it's the one that will propel us into development as we look into the future of development. This will be the pillars that we need to enhance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Elsie. Elsie, thank you and the team at UNDP for allowing you to join us via Zoom because you were meant to come here directly and you had to travel all the way from Fort Portal. We want to thank the team at UNDP for ensuring you joined us. All right, Godba, I'll come to you, but Fred, I want you to get that microphone. We'll see if you can hear.
Uganda Water and Environment Week 2020 is back. Join sector stakeholders as we discuss the centrality of water and environment resources for inclusive growth, employment, wealth creation, and how sustainable development and management of these resources can help Uganda address current challenges caused by COVID-19, raising water levels, flooding, and job loss. The Water, Environment, and Climate Change online sessions run from 13th to 18th September 2020 on UBC TV, NBS TV, and via Zoom. No matter who you are, where you are, and what you have, do your part to sustainably manage and develop water and environment resources for improved household incomes and quality of life. This message is brought to you by the Ministry of Water and Environment in proud partnership with WaterAid, GIZ Natures, IRC, FAO, and Water for People.